Hello and Happy New Year to all of you. This is January 3rd, 2021. And this is Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice, speaking to you from the Republic of Kanata, formerly the Dominion of Canada, now under common law republic jurisdiction. This is a New Year's message to all of you. It's entitled Birthing the Better Land. And this message is coming to all of you from myself and the Sovereign Republic of Kanata. Now, I want to start with a couple of really heartwarming and relevant quotes. The first from a man called Joseph Plum Martin, who is a survivor of the American Revolution. He served in the Continental Army from joining as a young boy right through to manhood. And many years after the Revolution, he wrote, "Those who joined our ranks and ran away when the shooting began knew nothing of our long suffering and what our nation cost us in blood. But neither did they know the glory of our triumph, nor did they earn a place in the life of our republic." And Thomas Paine, in his book Common Sense, wrote in the same period, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." We have it in our power to begin the world over again. That simple truth is at the basis of all that we do. We do not take our cue from the old dying regime, but from the new nation we're bringing into being. Because what was a newborn just a year ago has stood up and walked among us during the year 2020. A newborn that is the sovereign republic, struggling to grow amidst the corruption of a dying regime called Canada. Well, we have the COVID police state to thank for that growth, in the way that it's awakened many people to the global corporatocracy imposing its hideous dictatorship on all of us. But also many people on the ground who have begun to do more than talk, who have begun to establish the republic through action. Our republic is in its infant stage, and it's at its most vulnerable right now, for the same reason that another child provoked the wrath of a king named Herod, because no tyrant can tolerate the unshackling of his slaves, and that tyrant will kill the infant liberty in its cradle. Nevertheless, we here in Kanata have shaken the throne of the tyrant. To give you an example, last February, our republic was active in just 13 communities. Now it's active in 109 communities, nearly a tenfold growth in our local groups. Now, our message that people can govern themselves, not only can govern themselves, but must at this time, and reclaim the nation directly, that's caught the imagination of many Canadians who were formerly complacent. And that tenfold growth in the number of our local groups has been accompanied by a 20-fold increase in the number of people who have taken out citizenship in the Republic, by taking the citizenship oath, whereby they renounce all allegiance to the Crown of England, so-called Queen Elizabeth, and the Government of Canada, and taking instead a pledge of allegiance, pledge of citizenship to the Republic of Kanata, and stands within its national jurisdiction. I mean, even government polls indicate that over 60% of Canadians now want a republic, and they want to cut ties with the now criminally convicted Crown of England. It's kind of like what John Adams observed in 1793 when he said the revolution triumphed in the hearts and minds of the people before any shots were fired. And that same process is happening now in Kanata. The revolution is triumphing in the minds of people. And the question is, how do we put it into practice? Well, the good news is that people are flocking to our republic in a way that we can't even keep up to, the number of volunteers every week. And yet the downside is that the impulse to liberty in people is continually constrained by their fear and their learned dependency. We experience this in all the assemblies, all the local cell groups we're setting up. Even the most awakened citizen in our republic tend to balk when it comes to passing and then enforcing their own laws. When they pass laws that abolish the COVID measures, issue arrest warrants, or reclaim tax money and keep it in the local community, they pass the laws fine, and yet they hesitate to enforce. Because the idea of governing ourselves is fun in theory, but frightening in practice, because at that point, when we practice it, we're directly challenging the corporate state for power. Even a very aware Republican citizen will still ask the question, well, who gives us the authority to do this? Not even recognizing that the authority is within here, the sovereign people. It begins and ends with us. You see, our lifelong conditioning to defer to other people and to seek our own safety first, that's the biggest roadblock to the rise of our republic. And in fact, it's far more of a roadblock than any overt repression by the police or the state. Because we ourselves are holding ourselves back. We, the policeman in our own mind, is our enemy. Well, that caution denies us the chance to earn our freedom and be changed in the process of struggling for it. That's how change happens. It doesn't happen by reading stuff off the internet or talking in a group. Change happens when you engage with your enemy and you learn from experience their nature. The nature of what you're up against can only be learned by contact with it. As Samuel Adams wrote back in the American Revolution, our people won their final independence from the British Empire only when they clashed with it in arms. The peacetime patriot chooses the path of forbearance and least resistance, clasping to the chains forged around his thoughts until those chains are blasted away. Until those chains are blasted away. It's the nature of the universe for change and conflict to occur. We can't avoid that conflict. We have to talk among ourselves and then act, knowing how best to have that conflict serve us rather than the corporatocracy. Well, I've witnessed this truth time and again over the past year in the over 24 local republic assemblies I have helped to organize and I've sparked all across Kanata. Often people will pass their own bylaws, but then they refuse to enforce them. Rather than elect and train their own common law sheriffs, they'll seek out allies among the local police. Well, this avoidance has weakened our resolve in our ranks, and it's actually aided the destruction of our local assemblies by saboteurs and infiltrators when they do come in, as they have all over the West Coast in particular. And yet something deeper than fear is at work in this mental servitude of people. And that deeper thing is really a spiritual captivity to the status quo and its group mind. And that captivity has to be broken for our actions to catch up to our words and our beliefs. Well, to give you an example from history, it was no accident that the American Revolution was preceded by a few decades by something called the Great Awakening. It was a grassroots spiritual revival movement all over Eastern America. It swept the local farming and local town communities, and it really set the stage for the revolution. Many American settlers expected Christ's imminent return, and they sought to prepare themselves inwardly and outwardly in the world for the new world that was to come, a world of freedom, love, and liberty. Well, in so doing, in reclaiming their own sovereignty in their own hearts and minds, they learned to be spiritually sovereign and cut their dependence on the established churches and on their crown-ruled bishops. When many so-called ordinary people learned to seek the truth for themselves and seek their own salvation among themselves, the will to achieve political independence followed naturally. Those people were ready. As a matter of fact, by learning to govern their own minds and hearts through that inner freedom, through that Great Awakening movement, the formerly colonized Americans made the revolution possible on the ground. And that's the important point for us. In fact, many of the frontline soldiers in the American Continental Army were citizen preachers in the Great Awakening's free congregations run by and for the people. Not churches, congregational assemblies run by and for the people, knowing that the kingdom of heaven is within each of us, not within a church or churchly rulers. Well, it may be self-evident that here in Kanata we are greatly and badly in need for such a spiritual awakening. But such a fundamental change cannot be summoned on command, especially in a spiritual dead zone like the global corporate culture that so seems to shackle many people's minds and lives. It's undeniable that Canadians in particular seem incapable of imagining anything other than their servitude to a system that drips with the blood of the innocent in the past and still today. Well, I learned this personally and up close over many years after stumbling on the hard evidence of Canada's mass murder of tens of thousands of innocent children in the so-called Indian residential school, and how that genocide is continuing today. When I and a few others placed the truth of that slaughter before Christian Canada, it responded with not only a general yawn of indifference, but with an inhumanity that proved the guilt of the entire society, and particularly its churches. For the same church and state that tore children to pieces and murdered them, then absolve themselves of that crime without a trace of heartfelt sorrow, reducing an unspeakable abomination to a stale issue of monetary compensation and apology, as if you can apologize to the dead. Well, people who act that way, who have no feeling for the ones they've slaughtered, that's the way the Walking Dead act. People without a soul. Well, having had my own life destroyed by these same ghoulish killers, my former allegiance to the corpse called Kanata vaporized many, many years ago. But many of us with a foothold in the system who still rely on it for things, and including psychologically, those kinds of people reside in a gray zone between the new world and the old world. And they're still bonded to the very thing they verbally or mentally oppose. Now that's the irony. People will speak against the system and yet they can't imagine breaking from it. That bond is so deep that they're blind to it. Even when that reliance on the system carries on when the system's attacking them and stopping them from asserting their freedom, they still cannot imagine anything but that system. Well, our blindness to the horror that should make us all vomit, that should repulse us, comes from a kind of spiritual possession. It isn't just mental dependence, it's that we are spiritually in a state of possession. We're raised in that state of possession by an unseen, call it an oversoul, whose power over us cannot be destroyed simply by individual effort, but rather by creating a new alternative spirit, a collective presence that manifests physically as a republic, but is a spiritual reality. We imagine ourselves to be free enough to create that different presence on our own in the form of our own sovereign republic. But when we actually try to do so, our possession will often restrain our minds and our actions. To give you an example, since March of 2020, 11 of our assemblies have been deliberately destroyed from within by paid operatives employing standard divide and conquer methods. But none of their subversion could have worked unless people in these assemblies were already disposed to fear and manipulation and lies. Well, fortunately, from the ruins of those groups that were destroyed has emerged a remnant of citizens who've learned from the experience. They've learned from the contact with the thing we're fighting, and they've been liberated by their possession by it, from having engaged with it and fought it. That's how you break the shackles around your mind and soul. And from that experience now, they're carrying on as veteran leaders who are establishing local republic cell groups that are less prone to infiltration, having learned a lesson. And that hardened remnant is slowly growing across Canada. What matters is that each of us learn from our experience and never give up, but always persist with the vision and program of the Republic. And my own life is an example of the power of not giving up. Over 20 years, I and a few other people forced the truth of genocide onto the agenda. We even forced a pope and 3 cardinals to resign because of pure determination and not giving up. Well, if our own great spiritual awakening will occur in Kanata, it will emerge from out of these hard-won lessons and the many battles to come. In the course of these tests, something will be sparked that none of us can foresee prior to any battle. And this is important. A power that emerges in the course of fighting that you can't foresee beforehand. And that power is referred to in The Art of War. When General Sun Tzu identifies it in this way, he says, "Do not avoid hopeless situations. Embrace them. Place your troops where they cannot retreat, but they must fight to the death. In such an inescapable position, they will discover a resolve and a courage they never knew they had, and which is more powerful than the sum of their parts. Necessity and conflict evoke such power. It cannot be planned or foreseen." Well, it's amazing when you think of it. That unexpected power is in truth the doorway to the new society we envision. We can't imagine the courage and determination we have until it's required. But once we enter into that, a new door opens up. And it gives people the chance to see the force that can make the Republic a working possibility. If there's one general error our organizers and citizens continue to make, it's to not trust the power of a hopeless situation and not trust the capacity of people to change suddenly and unexpectedly. We have to use every moment to not simply teach people about the Republic and train them into how to create it, but we have to prepare for to take advantage of those brief and passing opportunities to strike at our enemies when they're off balance. Many such moments of opportunity appear, and they have to be grasped firmly once we have the eyes and the wisdom to recognize the moments. Napoleon advised this, saying, "There is a key place and moment in every battle, which if not seized will turn against you and cause your defeat." We have to be aware of what that key moment is. Well, as 2021 dawns, our republic exists in many scattered seeds that have rooted and they're beginning to sprout. But the only thing holding back their growth is really our own fear and caution. Now is the time for us to be audacious and to raise high our flag and for our nation, for all to see, by constantly launching public actions that directly reclaim Kanata under our new jurisdiction, seizing the buildings and the assets of the crown corporations, the genocidal churches. All exists now in our hands. All the property and lands and forfeited of the crown, it's gone, it's forfeited and now belongs to the people. Our local cells and assemblies have to unite into a national presence so that everyone can recognize the Republic as a working alternative to this criminal conspiracy called Canada. And towards that end, our upcoming Constitutional Convention will create the framework and the institutions of our new nation, including a National Supreme Court of the Republic and a National Congress. Well, we found from our experience and from history that the power of any system is in constant change and flux, and it can shift in any moment. And that if the revolutionary movement is seasoned and positioned properly to seize that moment, even the strongest tyranny can topple. But without an alternative power to take its place, people will neither assist that downfall nor help build a new society. And so our final message today is this. It is our job now to create that alternative known as the Sovereign Republic of Kanata in our communities where we are and unite those grassroots movement into our national presence. We know in our hearts that it is within our power to begin the world over again. Let us do so in this exciting year of 2021. republicofkanata.ca, murderbydecree.com. This is Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice, co-convener of the Republic of Kanata. Stay strong, carry it on. Thank you.